If you think your life has been unlucky, you've misunderstood it. What you call bad luck is a pattern trying to wake you up. If you look back at your life and only see chaos, disappointment, mischances, and delays, you're misreading the message. What you call randomness is actually repetition. And repetition is never accidental. It's instruction. The same situations keep returning because something in you keeps responding the same way. Not consciously, but instinctively. Life doesn't punish blindly, it reflects precisely. Until you recognize the pattern, you remain inside it, mistaking familiarity for fate. Most people believe they are unlucky. But luck doesn't repeat itself with such precision. The same emotional wounds, the same types of people, the same collapses after brief progress. This isn't chance. It's a psyche trying to complete unfinished work. You weren't failing. You were being shown something you refused to see. Every time you avoided confrontation, life gave you a louder one. Every time you ignored your limits, reality enforced them. Every time you betrayed your own values to belong, the cost increased. The pattern tightened because subtle lessons were ignored. This is how development works. It escalates. What feels like sabotage is actually refinement. Life strips away what doesn't fit the person you are becoming. The problem is, most people cling to their old identity while demanding a new outcome. That contradiction creates suffering. You can't outgrow a pattern while protecting the behavior that sustains it. Think carefully. The moments you call bad timing often arrived when you were internally divided. You wanted change, but feared responsibility. You wanted success, but not exposure. You wanted truth, but not its consequences. So the world stalled you, not to deny you, but to delay damage. Patterns exist to build awareness. They force you to notice what you unconsciously repeat, how you choose, how you tolerate, how you retreat, how you overextend, how you silence yourself when it matters most. Until this becomes conscious, you don't have freedom, you only have variation. This is why insight changes everything. The moment you see the pattern clearly, it begins to lose power, not because it disappears, but because you no longer act blindly within it. Awareness disrupts compulsion. Choice replaces reaction. And this is where most people turn back. Because seeing the pattern means accepting responsibility for it. It means admitting that you were not just a victim of circumstances, but a participant in their continuation. That realization stings the ego, but strengthens the self. The mature mind would rather be responsible than innocent. Once you reach this point, your relationship with difficulty changes. You stop asking, why does this keep happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to complete in me? That shift alone moves you out of stagnation, because the pattern was never meant to trap you. It was meant to finish something. Unfinished inner conflicts demand resolution through experience. If ignored internally, they manifest externally. Life doesn't let unresolved tensions rest. They return disguised as people, obstacles, delays, and losses. And when you finally confront them, when you stop running, stop rationalizing, stop numbing, the repetition loosens. The same situation no longer needs to repeat because the lesson has been integrated. This is not mystical. It is psychological precision. Growth is not about adding more. It is about removing what no longer belongs. Old defenses, old fears, old stories about who you are and what you deserve. Patterns dissolve when their function ends, and that's when something strange happens. Opportunities appear that didn't exist before. not because the world changed, but because you did. You now recognize openings you previously ignored. You respond instead of react. You choose instead of default. From the outside, it looks like luck. From the inside, it feels like alignment. The pattern was never random. It was a signal. And once received, it no longer needs to repeat, leaving you standing at the edge of a different trajectory, aware that what comes next will not be familiar, not because it is easier, but because you are no longer the same person who kept recreating what you have finally understood. It's painful watching others win while you stay stuck. But what if they weren't chosen and you were just being prepared? Watching others rise while you remain in the same place creates a quiet kind of suffering. It doesn't always show as jealousy. Sometimes it shows as confusion, sometimes as self-doubt, sometimes as the haunting question of whether you missed something essential that everyone else understood instinctively. But the comparison is misleading. You assume everyone was playing the same game. They weren't. Some people rise quickly because their path demands speed, not depth. Their structure is built for momentum, visibility, and immediate feedback. They move forward by acting, adapting, and risking exposure early. That approach rewards decisiveness, not introspection. You, however, were delayed for a different reason. Your development required internal reorganization before external movement, and internal work has no visible milestones, no applause, no measurable progress, just tension, uncertainty, and long periods where nothing seems to change on the surface. From the outside, it looks like stagnation. From the inside, it feels like pressure. Most people never experience this pressure because they never pause long enough to feel it. They build over unstable foundations and call it success. It works until it doesn't. You were spared that collapse. While others collected achievements, you collected insight. While they refined performance, you refined awareness. While they strengthened identity, yours was dismantled. That process feels like falling behind, but it's actually preparation for something more demanding. Speed and readiness are not the same. Many who rose quickly are now trapped maintaining an image they outgrew. They can't slow down without losing status. They can't change direction without admitting emptiness. Their success became a cage built from early momentum. Waiting protected you from that trap. Your delay wasn't about punishment. It was about timing. Some personalities require consolidation before expression. If exposed too early, they fracture. If forced into visibility before integration, they burn out or become rigid. So life slowed you down. It placed obstacles in front of opportunities. It introduced hesitation where others felt certainty. It forced you into observation rather than action. And that frustration wasn't wasted. It was shaping discernment. Because discernment is power once movement begins. When you finally act, you won't chase every opening. You won't confuse attention with progress. You won't confuse motion with direction. You've already seen how hollow rapid ascent can be when it isn't grounded. This is why your patience wasn't passive. It was formative. You were learning when not to move, when not to speak, when not to commit. Those lessons don't feel like progress at the time, but they prevent catastrophic misalignment later. There is also another truth that's harder to accept. Some people rise because they fit the existing system. You didn't. You questioned it instinctively. You felt the tension between what was rewarded and what felt authentic. That friction slowed you, but it also preserved your integrity. Conformity accelerates advancement. Authenticity complicates it. And complication is where depth is formed. You were never meant to win by imitation. If you tried to move when others moved, you would have succeeded in the wrong direction. Your hesitation was not weakness. It was refusal to build a life that required self-betrayal. So, while others were climbing visible ladders, you were confronting invisible contradictions. While they were gaining approval, you were losing illusions. While they were being validated, you were being tested. That test wasn't about endurance. It was about coherence. Now something has shifted. The waiting no longer feels like paralysis. It feels like compression. The tension that once drained you now sharpens you. The clarity you gained during stillness begins to translate into action. This is the turning point most people never reach. Because once the internal order is established, movement accelerates naturally, not frantically, not desperately, but decisively. You don't need to prove yourself anymore. You need to express what's already consolidated. And when that happens, the distance you thought you lost time covering collapses quickly. Depth shortens the path. So when you look at those who rose while you waited, don't measure yourself against their timing. Measure yourself against their stability, their freedom, their ability to change without fear. Because rising early is easy. Rising aligned is rare. And what comes next for you will not look like catching up, but like stepping into a different game altogether. One where movement no longer feels forced, where effort aligns with meaning, and where progress no longer depends on comparison, but on the quiet certainty that the waiting was not an absence of growth, but the exact condition that made this phase possible. You didn't lose because you were weak. You stalled because you refused to face the part of you that scares you. There is a conflict most people spend their entire lives running from, not because it is unbearable, but because it threatens the image they hold of themselves. This conflict is not external. It doesn't announce itself through chaos or catastrophe. It lives quietly beneath habits, moods, and repeated decisions, shaping outcomes while remaining unseen. You avoided this war not out of cowardice, but out of self-preservation. At some point, you sensed that looking too closely would change everything. That questioning your motives would unravel your certainties. That examining your anger, your fear, your desire for approval, and your hunger for control would dismantle the version of yourself you learned to survive with. So you postponed the confrontation. Instead, you stayed busy. You improved the surface. You refined skills, collected knowledge, and managed appearances. From the outside, it looked like growth. On the inside, the tension remained unresolved because no amount of external progress can silence an internal contradiction. The war you avoided was between who you present to the world and what you actually feel, between who you were told to be and who you intuitively know yourself to be. These opposites cannot coexist indefinitely. One eventually demands recognition, and when ignored, it doesn't disappear, it manifests. It shows up as sudden exhaustion, as irritability without cause, as a persistent sense that something is missing even when things are going well. It emerges in self-sabotage at critical moments, in the urge to retreat just as momentum builds. This is not failure. It is resistance to fragmentation. The psyche resists being split for too long. It demands integration. And when that demand is unmet, it creates friction strong enough to force awareness. You mistook that friction for weakness. In reality, It was the beginning of strength. The inner war is not about eliminating darkness, fear, or aggression. It is about recognizing them as part of your total energy. What you repress does not vanish, it turns against you. What you acknowledge becomes available for conscious direction. Avoidance feels safer than confrontation because confrontation requires responsibility. It requires admitting that some of your struggles are not imposed by the world, but maintained by unexamined patterns within you. That realization destabilizes the ego, but it stabilizes the self. Most people choose comfort over coherence. You didn't, at least not completely. You delayed the battle, but you didn't escape it. And delay has a purpose. It allows maturity to catch up with insight. It ensures that when the confrontation comes, you are capable of surviving it. Because this war reshapes identity. When you finally turn inward, you see not just what you admire in yourself, but what you've disowned: resentment, envy, dominance, vulnerability, longing. These traits feel threatening only because you were taught to deny them. Yet they contain the very energy you've been missing. Strength was locked inside what you refused to face. The turning point comes when you stop judging these aspects and start understanding them. When anger becomes information, when fear becomes orientation, when desire becomes direction rather than compulsion, this is integration. It doesn't make you softer. It makes you steadier. People who haven't fought this inner war often appear confident, but their confidence collapses under pressure. Yours, once integrated, will deepen under stress. That is the difference between performance and presence. You no longer need to prove anything once your inner contradictions are reconciled. You stop seeking validation because you are no longer divided. Decisions become cleaner. Boundaries become firmer. You waste less energy managing impressions and more expressing truth. This is why the war was unavoidable. External victories mean little when internal conflict remains unresolved. Every achievement feels hollow when the self is fragmented. But once the internal opposition is recognized and ordered, effort becomes aligned and action gains weight. You avoided this war until you were ready to win it. Not by destroying parts of yourself, but by claiming them. Not by suppressing instinct, but by placing it under conscious direction. And when this happens, life stops feeling like resistance and starts feeling like participation, because you are no longer fighting yourself in the dark, no longer leaking energy into denial, no longer split between who you appear to be and who you actually are, standing whole for the first time, aware that the real battle was never against the world, but against the refusal to know yourself completely. Victory doesn't announce itself. It arrives silently when you stop asking permission to be who you are. Power rarely arrives the way people imagine it will. There is no announcement, no surge of emotion, no dramatic turning point others can witness. When power returns, it does so quietly, almost unnoticed at first, because it is not added from the outside, but recovered from within. For a long time, your energy was scattered, not wasted, but divided, pulled into explanations, justifications, people pleasing, self, doubt, and the constant need to be understood. Each of these leaks seemed small, but together they drained you. You lived reactively, responding to circumstances rather than directing them. The loss of power didn't happen suddenly. It happened gradually. Every time you said yes when you meant no, something receded. Every time you adjusted yourself to avoid conflict, a boundary dissolved. Every time you waited for permission, explicit or imagined, you placed your authority outside yourself. None of this was weakness. It was adaptation. You were learning how the world responds, where it rewards compliance and where it punishes authenticity. That education had a cost, and the cost was temporary disempowerment. The moment power returns is not marked by force, but by withdrawal. You stop explaining, you stop defending. You stop trying to be seen accurately by people committed to misunderstanding you. That decision feels small, but it is structural. It changes how energy flows through you. Silence replaces argument. Clarity replaces urgency. Presence replaces performance. You don't feel stronger at first. You feel calmer, and calm is often mistaken for passivity. But calm is the sign that inner conflict has reduced. When you no longer argue with yourself, your actions gain weight. Power returns when your attention comes home. Instead of scanning the environment for cues, approval, threats, validation, you remain centered. You observe without absorbing. You respond without reacting. This is not detachment, it is containment. Contained energy accumulates. Your posture changes subtly. Your voice lowers, your movements slow. You are no longer in a hurry to prove relevance. Others sense this shift before they understand it. It unsettles some. It attracts others, not because you demand attention, but because you no longer chase it. This is the paradox of power. It increases when the need for it decreases. You stop overcommitting. You stop narrating your intentions. You stop negotiating your boundaries internally before asserting them externally. What once required effort now feels natural because you are no longer split between desire and permission. The return of power also changes how you relate to conflict. You no longer escalate to feel significant, nor avoid to feel safe. You address what matters directly and let the rest dissolve. This selectivity conserves energy, and conserved energy becomes authority. Authority doesn't raise its voice. The world tests this shift. People accustomed to your availability push back. Old dynamics attempt to reassert themselves. The invitation to over-explain returns. But this time, you notice it. And noticing is enough to refuse. Refusal does not require hostility. It requires firmness. This is where power stabilizes. You realize that most pressure loses force when it is not met with reaction. That most manipulation depends on urgency. That most control mechanisms fail in the presence of self-trust. So you move differently. You listen more than you speak. You choose fewer battles, but you don't retreat from the ones that matter. Your decisions carry less emotion and more intention. You no longer need outcomes to justify your actions. This internal alignment creates external impact. Opportunities shift. Conversations change tone. People either adjust or distance themselves. Neither outcome concerns you because your center is no longer negotiated. You are not trying to be impressive. You are being precise. The moment power returns is also the moment you stop waiting for certainty. You act from coherence instead. You trust what you've integrated, not what you can predict. That trust eliminates hesitation, and hesitation was the final drain on your energy. You are not louder. You are not harsher. You are not dominant. You are anchored. And anchored individuals exert influence without effort because their presence communicates something words cannot. That they are no longer available for inner compromise, no longer fragmented by external demand, no longer dispersing energy into roles that don't reflect who they have become, standing in quiet authority, fully aware that power was never taken from them, only misplaced, And that reclaiming it did not require force, but the decision to stop giving it away. If you're hearing this now, it's not motivation, it's timing. And timing is never accidental. There is a moment in development that arrives without spectacle, when the sense of waiting dissolves and is replaced by something quieter and more dangerous: readiness. Not hope, not excitement. Readiness is unmistakable because it carries weight. It does not rush, it does not ask, it simply recognizes that the internal conditions have finally aligned. For a long time, your life felt delayed. Not paused, but held just short of momentum. You could sense potential, yet every attempt to move forward met resistance. That resistance was not failure. It was calibration. You were being shaped for something that would not tolerate fragmentation. Timing is not measured by calendars. It is measured by coherence. You were not ready when you were desperate. You were not ready when you wanted results to prove worth. You were not ready when you still needed validation to feel real. Power given at those stages would have magnified instability, not fulfillment. So life withheld acceleration. Instead, you were placed in situations that tested patience, discernment, and restraint. You learned how to stand without applause, how to hold tension without collapsing into distraction, how to watch others advance without abandoning your own internal standards. That capacity is rare. Most people require external motion to feel alive. You learned how to remain present in stillness, and stillness is not emptiness, it is containment. Containment is what allows energy to gather rather than dissipate. This is why now feels different. You no longer need success to confirm your identity. You know who you are without witnesses. That self-recognition changes how you act. You are not trying to escape the present or compensate for the past. You are responding to what is in front of you with clarity instead of urgency. Urgency was the obstacle. When you act urgently, you accept whatever is available. When you act from readiness, you choose what is aligned. That selectivity creates better outcomes with less force. Another shift has occurred that you may not have named yet. Your relationship with fear has changed. Fear no longer paralyzes you, nor does it dominate your decisions. It has become information rather than command. You still feel it, but you are no longer governed by it. That is maturity. Maturity is not the absence of doubt. It is the ability to move without being ruled by it. You no longer need complete certainty to begin. You trust your capacity to adjust without self-betrayal. This trust was built slowly, through disappointment, through isolation, through moments where quitting would have been easier than continuing without reassurance. Each of those moments refined your internal structure. You didn't realize it at the time, but you were being trained in self-reliance. Now, when opportunity appears, you don't grasp at it. You evaluate it. You sense whether it demands compromise or expression. That discernment is the difference between advancement and entanglement. This is why it is finally your turn. Not because circumstances suddenly became favorable, but because you can now handle unfavorable ones without losing alignment. You can endure complexity without simplifying yourself. You can hold responsibility without inflating your ego. Your presence has changed. You no longer announce intentions. You execute quietly. You no longer need to convince others of your seriousness. You let consistency speak. This subtle authority is not learned through ambition. It is earned through integration. Others may not notice the shift immediately. Some will underestimate you because you are no longer signaling. that works in your favor. You are not competing for attention. You are positioning for impact. When movement begins from this place, it is efficient. You waste less time correcting missteps because you are not acting from impulse. You waste less energy managing impressions because you are not divided. Progress compounds because it is built on internal order. You have crossed an invisible threshold. The waiting phase is complete, not because time passed, but because the inner contradictions that stalled you have been resolved enough to allow momentum. You are no longer fighting yourself while trying to build something in the world. That internal ceasefire changes everything. So if it feels like something is opening now, trust it. Not blindly, but confidently. You are not early. You are not late. You are precisely where readiness meets opportunity, no longer needing permission to move, no longer seeking reassurance, no longer measuring yourself against others' timelines, but stepping forward with the quiet certainty that the delays, the resistance, and the long period of invisibility were not signs of exclusion, but preparation for a phase that demands exactly who you have become